Next, we have the gentlelady from Iowa, Ms. Miller-Meeks.
Thank you so much, Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Fox, and to all of our witnesses. I think it's vastly interesting listening to this topic of conversation. I'm from a family of 8 children. Neither of my parents were college educated. And so I find it interesting that listening to this discussion, my parents and siblings would not be trained teachers and would not have been able to somehow produce a child that's the first generation college graduate and the only one in their family to ever go to medical school and graduate. So I think we should be cautious on what we consider to be trained and adequate childcare, because there are millions of parents out there with no college education and no training who raise phenomenal children, children who have done amazing things to put men on the moon, developed airplanes, developed educational systems, and help start businesses that are Fortune 500 companies, all from very little resources. And because of that, that is the genesis of my question. There has been so much, I think, especially in K through 12 and in our society, that really is funneling students towards baccalaureate degree programs. And for many, it is their sole focus. But there are others of us who advocate for a variety of post-secondary options for students. Mr. McCluskey, in your written testimony, you write, in 1960, only 7.7% of Americans 25 years and older had a bachelor's degree or higher. In 2019, the number was 36%. The important question is whether this was a net gain for society. And if you can very briefly elaborate on what you mean by whether this is a net gain for society.
Sure. So we often talk about education, and the shorthand for are we getting more education is, do we have more degrees? Do we have more attainment? But what we really want to know is, are people getting more skills and knowledge that are of value to them and in the economy? And that's why, unfortunately, in higher ed, we don't have a lot of standardized tests, but we do have 2. We had, again, the National Assessment of Adult Literacy, 1992 to 2003. And then more recently, we have the PIAC. Both of them had 2 administrations. And you could see that the literacy levels, this is prose literacy, can you read a newspaper article? There was document literacy, can you read a tax form and understand it? And there was also sort of whether you were literate in math, whether you were numerate. And what we saw was prose and document literacy have been dropping consistently as we've increased credentials. The sort of good news is we've just stayed sort of flat when it comes to numeracy. But what this strongly suggests is that we're not actually creating more knowledge, more skills. We're creating more pieces of paper called diplomas. And that isn't what we should be aiming for. And we're doing it for a lot more money for each one of those diplomas.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Riedel, I believe incentives matter. As a state senator, we often address this when we are looking at healthcare professions. And when I would meet with colleges, would talk to them, we can do other loan programs, we can do scholarships, but what are you doing to lower prices? So, Congress, I think, well-intended, has wanted to make college accessible and affordable. That was the point of government-backed student loans and now direct federal student loans. While this is an admirable policy goal, colleges and universities were able to increase their prices because students had easy access to credit and, in essence, a guaranteed payment program. So it would cover that higher balance. So this in turn created more risk of going to college, more risk of indebtedness. And I think if you could just address that in the brief time I have left to me, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
That's a great question. I mean, it makes sense theoretically. Colleges will charge as much as their target students are willing to pay. And as their financial resources rise with student aid, colleges will capture that aid. We see the same thing happen in healthcare. Since 1978, the price of college tuition and fees has increased 1,335% versus CPI inflation of 293%. So it's grown 4 times faster than inflation. And there is a link. The New York Federal Reserve confirmed a few years ago that each dollar in subsidized student loans brings a 60-cent rise in sticker price tuition, which even goes to the people who don't get the loans. So you give loans to one group and another group gets a higher tuition as well. Even Pell Grants raise tuition by 37 cents on the dollar. And so we have to be careful. We mean well when we do increase student aid, But if the colleges are just going to raise tuition to capture it, we're not really helping with affordability.
Thank you so much. I yield back my time, Chair.